Dr. Rhee, you are up for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to be here today. I want to make 3 points today related to the inequalities in the current private sector retirement system related to race, gender, and income. And I'm so happy that you covered a lot of basic data. So I'm going to kind of reframe and talk about sort of the interactions between the employer-sponsored retirement system and the fact that it is now primarily a defined contribution system, and dynamics inside and outside the labor market that results in an incredible degree of inequality in retirement savings outcomes. So as you mentioned, the retirement benefit access in the private sector is incomplete. It's far short of 100%. And it also varies wildly by occupation, industry, and wage level, not to mention firm size, so that the likelihood of being offered a retirement plan as a private sector worker is directly correlated with your wage level. At the end of the day, only about 20% of workers in the bottom quartile, bottom 25%, have actually participated in a private sector retirement plan. So this intersects with sort of labor market segmentation, and also kind of women's work realities. One is that if you look at it by industry or occupation, the sectors with the heaviest concentrations of Black and Latino workers also have the lowest rates of retirement benefit sponsorship. I'm just going to pull out 2 sectors, hotel and restaurants. Latinos and Black workers are 60% overrepresented in that sector relative to their overall labor market presence. Only 33% of workers in that sector are offered a plan. Similarly, in administrative and wage services, it's which is also heavily overrepresented in terms of workers of color, only 38% have access. And then if you look at the top levels where workers are underrepresented in terms of workers of color, it's the reverse, right? You'll see 80% or higher rates of access in things like finance and business services. So the upshot of this is that only 46% of Black working households and 37% of Latino working households has anybody in a pension or 401k in that family, compared to 60% of white working households. So I would say that both white working households and households of color are not looking so good, but obviously there's an additional disparity. So I'm going to ask the facilitator to advance to figure 3. I just have a few charts that I want to highlight just to illustrate the magnitude of inequality. So if you skip forward to figure 3, please, thank you. So we're looking at retirement account balances among near retirement households by income quintile in 2019. And so just kind of eyeball this chart and you can see that there's a tremendous degree of inequality in account balances. And this is just typical account balances. If you look at mean or average account balances, it looks a lot worse. And then you'll notice the zeros in the bottom 40% of the chart. And that is because less than well under half of households in the bottom 40% of this age group basically they don't own a retirement account. So I'm gonna advance to figure 5, which shows the same kind of data by race. And this is for working age households age 25 to 64. And so again, you'll see that the median balance for all Black and Latino households is 0, because in fact, 60% of Black households and 68% of Latino households do not own a retirement account. And among the lucky few that do, the typical balance is less than half that of a typical balance of white households. And again, it looks much worse if you look at means as opposed to medians. Finally, on figure 7, just to break things out quickly by sex and marital status. So marriage definitely gives you a boost in retirement security, although the balances aren't that impressive. And single women-led households tend to be the worst off. So women face particular challenges in the employer-based retirement system. The data indicates that women have approximate parity with men in terms of retirement benefit access, but they also face a lot of challenges, and that is longer lives, the gender pay gap, and just in general lower wages than men, but also their lifetime earnings are really truncated by unpaid caregiving work. And that includes a cumulative cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars for women who have to take time out of the labor force. I see that we're over time, so I just want to highlight a couple of things. I've been deeply involved in the formation of the CalSavers Auto IRA program. And the states are just desperate for a solution to this problem because this is going to hit them in their pocketbooks and they know it. So some states have just jumped in and gotten tired of the federal government to act on universal retirement coverage. And at the same time, they're severely limited in terms of what they can do by ERISA preemption, right? So they can't take employer contributions. They can't cover the part-time workers who are excluded from ERISA regulated plans. And so I think there's need for federal leadership on this issue. And the last point I want to make is that wage policy is incredibly important. California enacted the $15 minimum wage the same day that it enacted CalSavers, and combined, it has the potential to increase low-wage workers' retirement incomes by up to 50% above the status quo. So wage policy is incredibly important. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rhee, let's talk about comparisons globally. We talk a lot about global competitiveness. Dr. Rhee or Dr. Garalucci, how do we compare vis-a-vis our global competitors? Dr. Rhee.
I think in terms of retirement plan coverage, I want to sort of stress that it's a totality, right, between Social Security, pensions, employer-sponsored pensions, and private savings. And we just want to make sure that there's universal coverage and that benefits are adequate. And I think that on the whole, U.S. Social Security benefits are less generous than other advanced countries, and we need to be doing more on the pension front. And that's actually not what's going on.
Thank you, Doctor.
In my little time remaining, let me ask you a question, Dr. Rhee. You know, occupational segregation so often results in people of color working in jobs that do not offer retirement savings plans. So I'd like to ask you to discuss how that factors into the disparities that you highlighted in your testimony.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of money in the 401k and IRA system. Most of the IRAs, which are individual retirement accounts, actually are rollovers from the 401k system. So basically, it requires participating in an employer-sponsored plan to save for retirement, and that's just human behavior. And the evidence clearly shows that workers of color in particular have difficulty accessing it and basically wind up with no retirement savings, right? Most Latino and Black households have no retirement savings. They're not seeing it. So there may have been increases, but if you just look at who has any and what those balances are, it's just woefully inadequate. And this is why we need to actually make sure in one way or another to have universal coverage, right? Either through the employer-sponsored system or through a complementary system, which is what the UK NEST program does.
Thank you so much. And not only for that great answer, but being so brief that you answered in the time I had remaining.
Thank you very much. Union members typically have greater access to retirement savings plans than their non-union counterparts. They also participate in these plans at a far greater rate than non-unionized workers. This is a part of what's referred to as the union advantage. In fact, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 91% of union workers have access to private sector retirement benefits, and 85% of the union workers participate in retirement plans. Meanwhile, 65% of non-union workers have access to private sector retirement benefits, and only 51% of non-unionized workers participate in plans. Dr. Rhee, do you think an increase in unionized workers might help address the disparities you mentioned in your testimony regarding access to the participation rates in private sector retirement plans, particularly among women and people of color?
So absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing this up. So insofar as workers of color have a retirement plan, whether it's a pension or 401k, it actually is disproportionately through the unionized sectors of the economy. And I also want to with regard to women and pensions, I also want to actually highlight they're more likely to have defined benefit pensions versus 401ks. They're just more likely to have more retirement savings. And I like to say that in terms of the households that are doing okay or well in terms of retirement readiness, you're either in the top 20% income bracket or you have a pension. With regard to women and pensions, it's particularly important because of the life expectancy issue. And if you look at data for current retirees, it's the women who used to be teachers who have the best retirement incomes. That's because they have that nice chunky pension income to supplement Social Security. So both pensions and unionization are absolutely critical for both workers of color having retirement security and women having retirement security.
And Dr. Rhee, in your testimony, you mentioned that workers face an increasing retirement savings burden and that workers of all backgrounds are worried about retirement, including millennials who are now hitting age 40. Could you please expand on why millennials are worried and what the data suggests about their access to and participation in retirement savings plans?
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to reference and submit, because I can't remember the exact statistics, some of the surveys that I've cited in my written testimony. So millennials have had a really rough time, right? So they kind of came of age into the labor market during the 2007-2008 financial crisis and the long recovery from recession that followed. And I think that really sort of influenced their thinking about retirement security. If you look at some of the work done by the National Institute on Retirement Security and their survey work focused on millennials, they found that they're actually very supportive of pensions, right? So it really kind of goes against this image of the free-flowing millennial who's just going to skip from job to job and wants all this flexibility. And I think in some ways, millennials have had flexibility imposed on them by the labor market and economic structure. And at the same time, there actually is this kind of heightened awareness of the risks imposed by the market. And so there actually is worrying and thinking about retirement savings. They are saving for retirement saving when they can. And also there's actually a high level of support for pensions.
Great. Thank you. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm going to yield back.